The rain had been falling for 3 hours when everything went wrong. Morgan Freeman stood under the canvas canopy that served as the cast shelter, watching water stream down the sides of the white tent like tears on a face that had given up trying to look composed. Outside, the film crew moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had learned that weather was just another obstacle to work around, not an excuse to stop. It was November 1994, and they were shooting the courthouse steps scene for a legal drama that would probably be forgotten within 2 years. But the work was good, the story was honest, and Morgan had said yes because the script had treated every character, even the small ones, with dignity. The director, Carl Brennan, was a competent man in his 40s who had made 3 solid films and earned the respect that came with not wasting investors' money. He ran a tight set, kept to schedule, and treated his actors like professionals who were expected to know their jobs. Which was why the morning had started to unravel when Tommy Chen, the 22-year-old actor playing the court clerk, had flubbed his single line for the 4th time in a row. It wasn't a difficult line. The court will now hear opening statements. 7 words that needed to be delivered with the kind of bureaucratic authority that made courtroom scenes feel real rather than theatrical. Tommy had gotten it right during rehearsal, but under the lights and the pressure of rolling film, something was causing him to stumble. "Cut!" Brennan called out, his voice carrying the edge that came when patience was starting to wear thin. "Tommy, let's try it again. Just the line. 7 words. Tommy nodded, wiped rain from his forehead, and walked back to his mark behind the podium. He was nervous. That much was obvious to anyone watching. New to film, hired because he looked right for the part and had done well in his audition, but clearly struggling with the reality of performing while 40 crew members watched and waited. "Rolling," called the first assistant director. "Action. The court will now—" Tommy stopped, his face flushing. "Sorry, can I start again?" "Cut." Brennan's voice was flat now, professional, but with an undertone that suggested he was calculating how much time and money each mistake was costing. "Tommy, you know this line. You've said it perfectly a dozen times. What's happening?" "I'm sorry, the rain is distracting, and I keep thinking about—" "Don't think, just say the line." Brennan looked around at the crew, all of whom were standing in the rain waiting for a 7-word sentence to be delivered correctly. "Let's go again." Morgan watched this exchange from his position near the monitors where he'd been waiting for his own scene, a simple walk up the courthouse steps that would come immediately after Tommy's line. He'd seen this kind of thing happen before. Young actors getting in their own heads, directors growing impatient, the whole production losing its rhythm because a small problem was being handled as if it were a large one. "Rolling. Action. The court will now hear opening." Tommy stopped again, shaking his head in frustration. "Cut." Brennan stepped out from behind the monitors, rain immediately soaking his baseball cap. "Tommy, this is not complicated. It's 7 words. 7 words that you knew this morning when we started." "I know, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help us stay on schedule. Sorry doesn't help when we lose the light." Brennan's voice was rising now, frustration overtaking professionalism. "This is basic. This is the basics of the job." Tommy's face was flushed with embarrassment and the effort of trying not to cry in front of 40 people. The crew shifted uncomfortably, some looking away out of courtesy, others watching with the kind of fascination that came from seeing someone else's humiliation. Morgan could see exactly where this was heading. Brennan would get angrier, Tommy would get more nervous, the simple 7-word line would become impossible rather than difficult. The scene would take an hour instead of 15 minutes, and everyone would remember the day as an example of how not to handle a minor problem. "Let's go again," Brennan called out, his voice now carrying the kind of edge that made everyone on set tense. "And this time, just say the damn line." That was when Morgan stepped forward. "Carl," he said quietly, walking over to where the director stood by the monitors. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Brennan looked surprised. Morgan had been nothing but professional for the 2 weeks they'd been shooting, showing up prepared, hitting his marks, delivering his lines with the kind of effortless authority that made everyone else's job easier. He wasn't the type to interfere with how other actors were directed. "What's up, Morgan?" "Just give me 30 seconds. Morgan gestured toward the far edge of the canopy, away from the crew and cameras. "Private." Brennan followed him, probably expecting some concern about the schedule or a suggestion about how to handle the weather delays. Instead, Morgan spoke in the kind of low, calm voice that made people lean in to listen. "Carl, that kid's not going to get the line right as long as he thinks you're angry at him. Right now, he's acting for your approval instead of acting for the scene." "He needs to do his job," Brennan replied, but his voice had already lost some of its edge. "I can't coddle every actor who gets nervous." "You don't have to coddle him. You just have to give him what he needs to succeed, instead of what he deserves for failing." Morgan glanced back toward Tommy, who was standing by the podium looking like he wanted to disappear into the rain. "He's 22 years old. It's his first film, and he's been watching you get angrier for the last 10 minutes. Right now he's not thinking about the line. He's thinking about not disappointing you again, which guarantees he will disappoint you again." Brennan followed Morgan's gaze to Tommy, who was now nervously adjusting his costume and avoiding eye contact with anyone. "What do you suggest?" Brennan asked. "Give him permission to fail. Tell him it's okay if he messes up, that we have plenty of film, that there's no pressure. Make it about the character instead of about his performance. But we are on a schedule, and we'll stay on schedule if you give him what he needs to get it right, instead of what you think he deserves for getting it wrong." Morgan's voice was gentle but certain, the kind of tone that suggested he'd seen this exact situation play out many times before. 30 seconds, he added. "Try it for 30 seconds and see what happens." Brennan looked at Morgan, then at Tommy, then at the crew standing in the rain waiting for direction. Something in his posture shifted, the anger replaced by the kind of problem-solving focus that had made him a successful director. "All right," he said, "let me try something different." They walked back toward the set, Brennan taking a moment to think before calling out to the young actor. "Tommy," he said, his voice now carrying the warm authority of someone who was in charge but not angry about it. "Come here for a second." Tommy approached nervously, still expecting criticism. "Listen," Brennan said, "forget about the line for a minute. Tell me about your character. What's he thinking about in this moment?" Tommy looked surprised by the question. He's been doing this job for 15 years. He's said these words 1,000 times. It's just routine for him." "Exactly. So for him, these words are automatic. He's probably thinking about lunch, or his wife, or the weekend. The words are just something he says while he's thinking about other things." Tommy nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "So don't worry about performing the line perfectly. Just let the character say it the way he would say it. Routine, automatic, while he's thinking about something else entirely." "Okay," Tommy said, and for the first time in 20 minutes, he sounded like he believed it might actually be possible. "Take your time," Brennan added. "We've got plenty of film, and if it doesn't work the first try, we'll just do it again. No pressure." They reset the scene. Tommy walked to his mark, but this time his posture was different, less like an actor preparing to deliver a crucial line, more like a court clerk who had said the same words countless times before. Rolling. Action. The court will now hear opening statements. The words came out naturally, with exactly the kind of bureaucratic routine that the scene required. Cut, beautiful, moving on. The entire crew seemed to exhale at once, the tension that had been building for half an hour, dissolving in seconds. Tommy smiled for the first time all morning, no longer the nervous young actor who couldn't remember his line, but a professional who had done his job well. Morgan watched this transformation from his position by the monitors, feeling something that was both satisfaction and recognition. He'd seen this pattern countless times over his decades in theater and film, the way that fear of failure created failure, the way that permission to be imperfect often led to perfection. But more than that, he'd seen how quickly the atmosphere on a set could change from tense to collaborative, from adversarial to supportive, when someone chose to address the problem rather than the symptom. As they moved on to Morgan's scene, the simple walk up the courthouse steps, he reflected on what had just happened. Brennan was a good director who had simply gotten trapped in a dynamic that wasn't serving anyone. Tommy was a capable actor who had gotten in his own head. The crew was professional people who wanted to do good work. The problem hadn't been any individual person. It had been the interaction between them, the way that frustration fed on nervousness and nervousness fed on frustration. Morgan's 30-second conversation with Brennan hadn't been about acting technique or directing philosophy. It had been about recognizing that sometimes the most important skill on a film set was the ability to create the conditions where other people could do their best work. When his own scene was finished, completed in 2 takes without drama or delay, Morgan found himself walking back to his trailer through the rain, thinking about the responsibility that came with being the most experienced person on a set. It wasn't just about delivering his own performance. It was about understanding that his presence could either contribute to an atmosphere where everyone did their best work, or where some people did work they were ashamed of. The choice between those 2 possibilities often came down to moments as small as a 30-second conversation with a frustrated director, as simple as suggesting that maybe the solution to a young actor's nervousness wasn't more pressure, but less. Years later, when people asked Morgan about his approach to working with younger actors, he would talk about creating safe spaces for risk-taking, about the difference between standards and pressure, about how the most important directions sometimes happened between takes rather than during them. But he would remember this rainy afternoon in 1994 as the day he fully understood that leadership on a film set wasn't about being the most talented person in the room. It was about helping everyone else access whatever talent they had brought with them. Tommy Chen would go on to have a solid career in character roles, appearing in dozens of films over the next 2 decades. But he would always remember his first film as the place where he learned that making mistakes was part of finding the truth, not evidence that you didn't deserve to be there. And Brennan would remember it as the day an older actor taught him something about directing that no film school had covered, that sometimes the best way to get what you want from an actor is to stop wanting it so desperately that you make it impossible for them to give it to you. But in the moment, walking back through the rain after a good day's work, Morgan simply felt the quiet satisfaction that came from using his experience to help rather than to intimidate, from being the kind of presence on a set that made other people's jobs easier rather than harder. The rain stopped just as they finished shooting for the day.